In the relaxation into this moment, into only this moment, into the presence of being. Natural attunement with the source, the light, the love that just is before everything. In this moment, this presence of being, the relaxation, so much softness, so much softness in yourself, just simply being here. A relaxation and a softening out of the tension of being someone, out of the tensions of protection, and just into the naturalness of being, into the naturalness of being yourself, just simply being here, just as you are. Tuning to the remembrance of what you are before you became anything that you have imagined you are. To remember the naturalness and simplicity of just simply being, that this being is a light, an openness that is love, that is pure. It is the remembrance of your purity, of your innocence and unboundedness. That what we are speaking of is not another experience that comes and goes. It is not an experience for the me to have. It is opening to the direct experience of who you are before the experience of being someone. Being someone is an experience. Experience is constantly changing. Who you are is a constant, stable, eternal nature. And that the human life is an opportunity, an incredible opportunity to remember the truth of who you are, to truly awaken out of the dream of separation and remember the light, the love that is wholeness. It is all about attuning with this natural resonance of being, opening to the finer and finer frequencies of yourself, coming to be a resonating beacon of light, of love. So that your own resonance is offering the possibility of deeper and deeper purification. It is resting in the resonance, the fine frequency of being, that purifies the seeming karmas and stories, the protections and holding patterns that keep limitation seemingly in place. There is nothing that we can do. It is all about attuning to a resonance that has the ability to purify and transmute. Life itself is the offering of purification. Life itself is the grace that allows purification to happen. And that when we are resting here in the open receptivity, we receive the grace and we allow this purification in the resonance of being, in the resonance of love, the illumination that allows everything that is not real to burn, dissolve, transmute into the remembrance of the unlimited, impersonal wideness of true nature. That the remembrance of who you are is not an experience. The remembrance of who you are is a direct knowing of the constant, immovable, unchanging presence of being that is the awareness. And the awareness, aware of itself, is resonating at a frequency that is so much finer than the consciousness of the mind body. And when we are resonating at this frequency of remembrance, we have the possibility to rejuvenate and transform everything that we have imagined ourselves to be. But not for the me. Everything shifts and transforms to bring a greater alignment with what is true, to allow the deepest possible remembrance of this truth and to truly resonate as a beacon, illuminated and resonating in the knowing. The flow of consciousness is always in the process of evolving and remembering its own purity. And there is the most extraordinary possibility, a possibility to remember the truth of who you are, to purify. The entanglement in the collective is so deeply entrenched. If we were really to try to take a measure, it would seem almost like a complete impossibility to untangle. That is how deeply the tangle is. But we do not say this to lose heart. We say this to amplify the importance that this is not a hobby, a part-time endeavor, and your main life is just engaging in the play and dancing as the separate one that's just moving to amuse themselves and enjoy. We say this to amplify the resonant possibility, the recognition of the possibility of what is really being offered in this lifetime. And that it truly takes everything if we are to untangle and purify in order to live this resonance. Because without the absolute fortitude and conviction, and without guidance, it's a near impossibility to untangle because of the densities in the collective consciousness. We have to make an absolute commitment, sincere commitment to keep resonating only aligned with pure love, with pure truth, and not engage in all of the ways that fear wants to entangle us in stories, in drama. It's around every corner. I cannot imagine the importance of this. That the possibility of receiving the grace and staying aligned, attuned, having the courage to shine, having the courage to be happy, having the courage to be a joyful, wide open, infinite, expansive heart, having the courage not to engage in stories and dramas and fears, having the courage to be a beacon of radiance, having the courage to be the power that can shift everything, having the courage to not go down with the ship, but to jump ship and swim in the ocean of bliss, and to know that swimming in the ocean of bliss is for the whole. Going down with the ship offers no one nothing at all. Do not sink with the ship. Have the courage to shine. Have the courage to be the radiance, the love, the light. Have the courage to be the transmutation, the transformation. Have the courage to be a way shower quietly. Have the courage to not go down with the ship, and to recognize that the possibility of this time, we could say, is to open more deeply than ever to the timeless, to remember the timeless eternity, to remember the glory of who you are in truth, where this knowing is known, and to shine, to keep purifying everything that appears in the life that wants to pull the attention, to keep purifying and purifying on every level, to keep purifying, pulling the tendrils that are entangled into the collective, keep pulling those tendrils out and freeing yourself from the collective, from the story of me, from the ideas of karmas, that you and you alone are the power that can transform. It is to recognize that this opening, this remembrance, is always for the whole. It's never for someone. There's no selfish gain involved. It is an utter surrender of the sense of me into the light, into the love, to purify and purify and purify, transform and transmute everything that feels like the personal, that is the sense of limitation, into the remembrance of the impersonal, unlimited, There is still a sense of a unique life, but that unique life belongs to no one. This is freedom. To know that the being goes nowhere. The being just is, and all beings are one in the one being. All beings are one light, one love. There is only the glory. And however it appears on the surface of life, it is to stay true to the knowing of the heart. There are so many opportunities to get entangled in the stories, so many opportunities to get entangled in all of the ways. The play of life wants to hook us. It is the difference between being the sheep or the tiger. It is to have such a conviction in the heart to be the tiger, to be the power, to break with convention, to not follow the pack, to not go down with the ship, to have the courage to be living radiance, to be love itself, whole and perfect, to not follow the thoughts and all of the ways that the mind wants to collapse into the tangle. It takes everything, because all that we have learned, the conditionings and the habits, are so entangled. To be resonating and aligning with the wide open infinite being, the field that is pure love, that is resonating at a frequency that is never ever dimmed or dulled or changed in any way by the mindscape, by the play of the world. The play of the world, and however that is perceived, is all according to the mind. And freedom is freedom from the mind. Freedom is a freedom to be yourself, to truly be yourself. In the silence, in the stillness, the profundity, in the stop, where there is no mind, no thoughts being followed and believed. There is just a simple, radiant happiness and openness. Everything that stirs the heart, everything that feels to be disturbing, it is to receive the churning, the stirring in the nervous system, and to allow this to be an unwinding, a releasing and a letting go of old stresses, old programs, old patterns. To not need to understand, not need to make anything of it, but just to allow the natural grace to flow. This wide open field is so alive with possibility. Anything is possible. And it is all about the resonance that we are aligned with and that we are resonating at, the finer frequencies that we can open to, that we come to discover the desireless being that we are, in truth, the one being, that we have no desires, not for the me. And yet, the profound thing is that resonating at infinity, the open field of possibility, it will bring in the highest possibilities into the created appearance that will help dismantle the protections. As we receive the dismantling of protections, the field starts to create out of wholeness, starts to create out of wholeness the sustenance, the reflection of beauty, the reflection of an undivided whole. And so it is that we receive the grace that flows as that which stirs us and unsettles us. But we have the courage to openly receive and receive the sensations and aliveness in the nervous system as old stresses are rattled and surfaced, extracted and transmuted. Because all of this is bringing us to a wider remembrance of what we are in truth. All of this is bringing us to a finer frequency of remembrance. There is only one, the one glory. And everything that is conspiring, that plays as life, even the sense of being a me, it's all conspiring to bring about the remembrance of one, the one glory, the one radiance, the one divinity, the one purity, a love that is supreme. It is this love that we are all longing for. But to open into the remembrance of being this love is to open to the frequency of remembrance of the being, the simple presence, the stillness, the silence, just simply being here. Nothing is as it seems to the mind. We are being invited to align with nature in order to remember true nature. That aligning with nature is to ground in the presence of being, to recognize that when we are grounded in the presence of being, we are grounded in the pure consciousness. Nature itself is a pure consciousness, but nature, we could say itself, is also an evolving consciousness. Aligning with nature supports nature. Aligning with nature supports nature. Nature supports itself. Nature is life. Life supports itself, flowing within itself, surrendering into itself. We see this reflected in nature, how nature surrenders into itself, how free it is to cycle, but life itself remains alive. This is life eternal. And this is the true nature that we are opening into the remembrance of, It is a cycling of life that never ever is not alive. It is life eternal, radiant life eternal, cycling in itself, never ever leaving itself, surrendering into itself in order to be in constant remembrance of itself, in constant aliveness. So as we open to the presence of being, we open to the flow of the aliveness of the knowing, where the knowing is, where knowing knows. There is this flow of life flowing within itself. And this flow of life is nature, true nature, and it is the naturalness. And it is the nature that we might sometimes refer to as the earth, Mother Nature. It's all one consciousness. And when we are resting in true nature, it's like we are in complete alignment with nature on the level of Mother Nature. We come into a deeper remembrance of that oneness. And that brings us into a remembrance of the power and the sustenance and how it's one nature. Grounded in the presence of being, in the remembrance of wholeness, we are supporting nature in our naturalness, supporting nature. Honoring nature, communing with nature, remembering true nature, being sustained by nature. It is to remember that we need nature and nature does not need us. Nature does not need the human experience, not in the way that the mind thinks it does, but the human experience needs nature, relies upon nature. And so we are being invited to commune, to remember true nature, and to come into this alignment with nature, to see how nature is reminding us. The whole of nature is in this flow of life, a flow of consciousness that is naturally in the process of evolution. That consciousness itself is in the process of remembering its own divinity. So we could say that while humanity is in this process, so too is the earth. And part of our test, the test of humanity, is to see how we honor the earth and nature. Because where we don't honor the earth and nature, we are dishonoring ourselves. Where we are damaging nature, we are damaging our own makeup, we are damaging our own bones. Where we damage the waters, we're damaging our own blood. Where we're damaging the air, polluting the air, we're damaging our own breath, right? It's one nature. It's one nature. We can think these ideas of earth my body, water my blood are somehow woo-woo, but they have their roots in truth. Yes, we are not the body. We are not limited to the matter, but our dance in the atomic world, let's say, is a test. It's a quest. And all of the ways of selfishness are about a self-imploding mechanism. We are being invited to remember the true self, to come to a selflessness where we are in the remembrance of self that is not selfish, the remembrance of self that is selfless, the self in remembrance of itself as nothing and yet as wholeness. that we are being invited into a depth of remembrance that shakes us to our core. But let what shakes us to our core bring us into surrender, where we see the ways that we're so entangled into selfishness, how we're so entangled into the me game, and how everything is inviting us to see through the narrow vision of me and let go of the personal and limitation into the glorious remembrance of true nature, aligned with nature. There is so much grace in being stirred right down to the bones, because being stirred right down to the bones, it reminds us of the fragility of a human life. It reminds us that the human life is not eternal, but the true nature is eternal. It reminds us and invites us to remember the life eternal, to truly use this human experience to free ourselves of limitation and come to the remembrance of what we are in truth. That every moment that we feel that we have a choice, it is to choose the glory, to choose love and not the fear. Every moment, to not skip a possibility. Every moment, love. Every moment, love. And to use any moment that feels like a disturbance or a shaky moment to see that this is the grace of purification happening, and that it is in the grace of purification that we are refining the frequency of remembrance of what we are, so that the remembrance of being the being is not a seeming experience that comes and goes, that the remembrance of being the being is the remembrance of the eternal, infinite, unbounded, untouchable truth of who we are, that we are boundless. Let us get wider and wider and wider until we no longer fit on the screen of limitation. Let us get so wide that we are boundless in the remembrance of truth. Let us remember that there are no problems except the mind's reflections and meanderings. It is to be resting in such a depth of remembrance of being that we are resonating too in this extraordinary compassion. And compassion is a natural extension into the whole collective, that the resonance of compassion is so powerful. It's so powerful. It's not the same as a resonance of watching images on the screen and being hit by sorrow and fear. That is not supporting anyone. That is collaborating with fear, with story. It is to come to the depth of compassion that is a frequency that can touch the whole. Compassion is the remembrance of oneness. Compassion is the remembrance of the absolute oneness, and that wherever we have areas of stress within our system, that where we are affected and disturbed, it is offering us the possibility to meet those stresses and disturbances in order to bring them into the boundless compassion of divinity, to bring all of our seemingly broken, painful, suffering, stressful places to the presence of love, to the remembrance of love. That all that we can move in is our own internal functioning. That the play and the idea of moving in the world is all a reflection of our internal functioning, all a reflection of the mind. That if we imagine that we have to move in the world in certain ways, that we can be distracting and pulling away from the possibility of refining our internal functioning and purifying within the sense of my life, because the purification of my life is the purification out of the tendrils of the personal and into the remembrance of the completely impersonal, which is life itself surrendering into itself. And it's the remembrance of being unlimited. It's the remembrance of union, the remembrance of oneness. But even where consciousness is remembering its oneness, it still has a ways to go, right? So it's incredible, it's profound, it's extraordinary, being in the process of being consciousness that is in the refinement within itself. But let the refinement be this flow of grace that keeps refining, keeps refining, keeps refining, that there is not a settling into any idea of what the me is achieving or gaining, because that is like it's like taking a break and bringing it all back to the mind. It's about surrendering and offering all that is being seen back into the whole, back into the whole. And we offer it back into the whole by being a constant offering, by never landing anywhere, but by constantly resonating at the frequency of wholeness. Whatever story comes in, whatever headline comes in, it's to not get taken out, to not be capsized, but to receive the grace of all of the stress that's trying to capsize, but just keep rebalancing, 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 and know that all of your rebalancing is this incredible offering to the whole. That the whole life is being offered to the whole, but is the life a movement of offering more fear and stress into the whole? Or is the life an offering of balance and a frequency of love? Even science can measure the frequencies of happiness, joy, like true happiness, joy, starts to measure off of the scales that scientists can measure, right? It goes off of the scale. So they can measure frequencies for fear and sadness and grief and anger, can measure frequencies, but the frequencies get finer, measuring what might get called the positive, like contentedness, happiness, joy, pleasure. But as we really start to resonate as happiness itself, we're off the scale of what can be measured, because the frequency is so fine. When we start resonating at the frequency of being, the frequency of true happiness, joy, of extraordinary, glorious radiance, we're off the scale, right? But here, these frequencies they turn the whole life into being like a living antenna that's putting out these frequencies, right? Your resonant frequencies of light. Your whole life is this, being this beacon of love, of light, that you are resonating and you're putting out these frequencies. You're supporting and caring for your family, your loved ones, your companions, silently, secretly. You're supporting the earth, nature. You're supporting the whole collective in its evolutionary process of awakening to itself. The finer the frequency that we are resonating at, the more support, the more profound. But of course, there's no one left to be imagining that I'm doing a good thing. Or does anyone realize how high my frequency is, right? It's not that kind of thing that's going on. There's no one left. But it's important to speak of this, because this recognition and this remembrance amplifies our sincerity. It amplifies our recognition of what it is to be living in an attunement with the whole as a living service vehicle, right? That your own process of refinement is an offering. So in this, your whole life is an offering. And that's why it's so important that the whole life is not sending back resonances of fear and stress back into the collective, that we're transmuting the stresses, right? We're transmuting the stresses. As we transmute the stresses that seem to be our personal stresses, we come to a deeper and deeper refined resonance of remembrance, and we feel more of the light and love and remembrance of being the unified field. We remember the awakeness, the glory, the radiance of what we are, and we live at the frequency of this radiance, and we are ever purifying into the remembrance of being pure love, being the glory, being pure divinity, ever refining, ever refining. This is the natural process that is happening. There are many ways to speak of it, but this is how we are speaking of it right now. It's so incredibly profound, and yet there's such a simplicity to the wisdom of it, is that the more that we just keep taking everything in and truly digesting everything within our own radiant remembrance, that we digest all of life. And when we speak of digesting all of life, we digest everything that's happening in the sense of your life. We take it all in, and we digest the stresses, we digest the disturbances and the upsets, we digest the protections, but we also want to make sure that we're truly digesting everything that we take in to our digestive system, because our digestive system is a nervous system. It's a system of consciousness that we can truly digest seasonal, simple to digest foods, and that we can also digest the life and the environments that we are in. This is why we want to be in nature very often, so that we are supported in our purification, because the frequencies of nature are very fine. The silence is very deep. The resonance is very naturally very deep, and it supports purification. It supports the purification of our respiratory systems, right? Because these big trees are the breath of life. The oceans are purifying our bloods, right? All of this. So when we're in nature, we're purifying, we're supporting our systems. Rivers, lakes, streams, right? Just these energies, the frequencies are purifying the waters of our physiologies, right? top of the mountain, well, the top of a mountain where there's not a lot of pollution. This kind of really pure airs, right? They're clearing. They're clearing. They're bringing the breath of life, finer frequencies, the breath of life. Good soil, growing food in good soil, ensuring that our bones and our bone marrows are prema, right? That our bones are pure love, pure nourishment, that the marrow is pure love, flowing resonances of pure love, right? All of these ways that we're one with nature. It's why we're so drawn to nature, to just lie down on the earth and just be purified, have the resonances and the frequencies be purified. Yes, what we are is eternal life, but eternal life is flowing through the whole of nature, right? What is destroying these flows of life? But of course, humans in their selfish gain experience generally, right? But it's a symbiotic dance. It's a symbiotic dance. And just as the whole story of separation is a story of collapse, right? We're coming to remember a wholeness, frequencies of wholeness, resonating at these frequencies of wholeness that are so transformational, so supportive to the whole, right? So this is why having the courage to jump ship out of convention is actually the greatest service to the whole, because there are beings that don't know any other possibility. There are beings that don't know what is possible. And that is why, where we do know what is possible, it's like a radiant duty to really live what is possible and to really be the living evolution of consciousness that is supporting the whole. To know your own goodness is to be resonating at goodness, at pure goodness, at pure wholeness. To know the love that you are is to be resonating as love and to be bringing this frequency of love right to the surface of life, loving, loving, just in the flow of living. You are loving. You are loving by being love, right? You are loving all by being an all-encompassing love. The deeper the remembrance of being love, you are loving. And as there is a transmuting of all of the threads of energies within the sense of your life that could have discordance, the work of purifying all of the stories of discordance, all of the places where there's holding resentments, upset angers, the work of purifying all of those frequencies of discordance into the remembrance of love, the oneness. So much value in purification, in purifying and releasing yourself, refining those resonances in the heart, in love. There's so much that can happen in the living of life that is so profound, uplifting for the whole, amplifying the resonance, being a beacon of love, of radiant light, and allowing the whole life to be the process of that. For some reason here, I'm being called to share a beautiful example of most of us know the oh, now I'm going to forget the name of it, the Ho'oponopono or something like that mantra, right? The forgiveness mantra. I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you, thank you, right? Now the beautiful being that was it was his life work to be sharing this, and he traveled all over. He wrote a book in collaboration with someone, but he traveled all over sharing this work to many beings. But the most profound part of his life, that is why I'm remembering this, why it's popping in right now, is that he stopped that. He stopped going out in the world and sharing, because he came to realize that just sitting, and that his whole life became just sitting and transmuting. I recall him calling it data, I think, calling it data. I saw an interview with him many years ago, but he I don't even know if he's still alive, but so deeply touched by the profundity and the wisdom of what he was sharing, deep wisdom, because so true that all of the kind of traveling out in the world, it doesn't even have an iota of the value of a being that's resonating in that kind of recognition and just transmuting, right? I don't know why I'm sharing that here, but maybe because it's a worldly story that you could look up, might be interested in, but very beautiful, profound. And of course, there's so much profundity that was discovered in that, in the mantra, the simplicity of what that forgiveness, prayer, because of course it's doing the work of purification, but it's doing it as a resonance, right? Sometimes we have spoken of this many years ago here even, but the sense of I'm sorry is like a surrender, a letting go of resentment, letting go. And wherever that's focused, but just the resonance of it is what is important. Please forgive me, like mercy, right? Again, surrender, mercy. The I love you is really the resonance of pure love, just loving. And thank you, of course, the resonance of gratitude. So it's not, that particular way of speaking about that prayer, that mantra that had so much profound transformation that continues to come out of it. But this is just to tie in, I guess, with what is being spoken here about resonating as the being, resonating at the frequency of love, at the frequency of mercy, at the frequency of constant surrender out of the meanness, at the frequency of utter gratitude for everything. Thank you. Not like, oh, that's not what I wanted to happen. I wanted, it's not about the selfish gain. It's resonating at this frequency of love, gratitude, mercy, utter surrender, and the willingness to do the work of purification within our systems that we might call my life, of where there are still holding prejudices, angers, resentments, right? Where there's anything that's not healed in your life, to do the work of recognizing that where there's those holding patterns, you're holding yourself in separation. to do the work of, sometimes it's just to really almost like write down, who are all those people? What are those characters? What are those stories where you're still holding something? Can you do the work of meeting those feelings and processing and letting go of resentment, hatred, upset, story? Can you process it all through your system? Digest what hasn't been fully digested, right? That we really digest all of life so that we can be this living frequency. So the more that we refine and refine, of course we are processing for the whole, because it is one whole consciousness that is refining within itself. But we have this possibility to untangle all of these tendrils of our entanglement in the collective, so that we are not, we're not processing on the level of the body, that we don't really notice so much the processing, because we're resonating at a frequency that is refining and refining, and it doesn't feel like a burden in any way, right? Just like trees, big ancient trees, what they're processing, right? It's like we have this possibility to be like a big ancient tree that can just process, digest, and just keep resonating and putting out love, light, just like the ocean, right? The rivers, throw all this junk in there and it just keeps it just keeps processing and just being this frequency of oceanic bliss, right? We have this possibility within our nature to process and transmute where we are naturally resonating at these fine frequencies of love, forgiveness, gratitude, just clarity, purity. And that as we resonate at these finer and finer frequencies, we're uplifting and supporting the whole. And life then starts to be, the unique life starts to be a reflection of these resonances. It's like the field of potentiality starts to bring about the most extraordinary, unimaginable possibilities, not the things that the me wants. When there's nothing that we want for the me, when we are at the end of desire, what starts to show up is extraordinary, things that we never would have imagined, things that we would never dared to have ask for, right? But we're given whatever is needed to keep maintaining and surrendering and resonating at these fine frequencies. We're given everything that will support the remembrance. And then we're moved in exactly the ways to keep refining and refining and refining, to just keep loving and loving and loving. There is such a profound shifting happening in the field right now, right? I know that for many that watch screens, there might seem like terrible things happening and destruction and hatred and war. But what is actually happening in the field is such an incredible aliveness of potentiality. And that is why we so profoundly want to align with love, and be the frequency of love, and not be dragged into the stories of darkness, because that's the frequency of fear, and it's flattening and it's hard on the body. right? Particularly if you have an openness or a sensitivity, if you get dragged into the stories, it will be very hard on the body. If you're believing the stories, now it's hard because the mind is so tuned to believing the stories, but this is such an opportunity to just keep resonating at the frequency of the love, the radiance that you are, where you can recognize right now in this moment, in the presence of being, there's nothing without thought, without story, without experience. What is here, right? We're speaking of the direct experience, because then the life starts to reflect and be an expression of the radiance, right? There's such a power and profundity in the field right now. And the profundity of this is that where we are resonating as love, this frequency is being amplified because of the frequency of the potentiality. Where we are resonating as love, it's like that frequency of love, and where we are resonating as this, there is so much extraordinary brilliance and subtlety that is being shown here. There's an amplification happening where we are resonating. So it seems like such a time, right, in the play of the world where you can be pulled into all these stories, but it's this naturally becomes a frequency of possibility, of transformation. And it's to align with the possibility of transformation and not the misery, right? It's to align with the possibility of transformation and allow whatever's stirred in your nervous system to be transmuted, and the stresses to be released and purified. And then to really rest in this amplified frequency of love, to really be carried into a finer frequency of bliss flowing, which the flow of bliss is the nectar that is needed to refine the nervous system, to refine consciousness, and to bring us into the deeper, subtler frequencies of remembrance of our own divinity. To notice the positive and beautiful occurrences in the life, how things are shifting, to notice the transformations and the shifts, the subtleties, where there's more love, where there's more light, where there's more ease, to really illuminate these areas that are clarifying is also a way that the purification deepens, where we're illuminating. In a way, this is aligning with the frequency of gratitude. That's what we're speaking of here. We're aligning with a frequency of gratitude that notices and sees the small glories, right? Because the small glories are the big glory radiantly shining in your life. So to recognize where the glory is shining, where the shifts are happening, where the presence of being is alive, where the knowing is so profound, that we're bringing in this, really enlivening this frequency of gratitude. Because the gratitude, when it is when we align with the frequency of gratitude that is divine gratitude, we bring more of the flow of the divine. Let's say is grateful for these lives lived, right? There's gratitude that's always flowing for these seeming lives that are being lived, right? It's not the way that it seems, but there is this flow of divine gratitude for all that we live through, all that we face and meet in the play of a human life. There's always this flow of gratitude. And when we align with gratitude, and we can really feel gratitude, it's this alignment with divine gratitude. So we feel grateful for whatever's happening, and we feel just gratitude for whatever the life is, whatever's happening, whatever's coming forward. And that gratitude is divine gratitude that's grateful for you, right? It's so beautiful because it's always self-generating, self-aware, and restoring itself in every way. It's always nourishing itself. So we want to attune to the deep, deep nourishment, right? The deep nourishment of gratitude, illuminating where the victories of the Jema, the victory of the divine light, where is that showing up, right? The grace of recognizing love that is pure, pure frequency, wide openness, total receptivity, being love, the remembering of union in the heart, right? It may feel like, well, that's not all the time, but that's the attitude of fear, right? It's okay for a moment. It's not all the time, but being in the grace of remembrance when it is here, because it's always here. And when we don't go into that negative spiral of the fear, we're keeping attuning with love. And for sure, as we attune with love, it will bring old stresses forward. And that can feel intense at times. But can we just allow the stresses to move through the nervous system, to know that they're old stresses and the releasing of them is for the whole? So here's like the mercy, this merciful love that just recognizes that there can be suffering in a human life. And we're not trying to change suffering, but this merciful love just receives it all, And that we have this on our knees, constant surrender. I'm sorry, please forgive me for anything and everything, all of the ways that I collaborate with separation, all of the ways that arrogance and ignorance might cloud these days, all of the ways that I am blind, where I do not see yet, right? It's this constant willingness to be in surrender, to not know, to actually completely admit that we know absolutely nothing. Nothing. We know nothing. We know nothing. We know nothing. We're absolutely empty to the core. Absolutely empty to the core. We know nothing. We've got no idea about anything. Nothing at all. And this is where surrender happens. That we actually know nothing. We know nothing. And here, in the surrender, we meet the flow of life that's ever surrendering into itself. We find ourselves in a oneness, a flow of attraction that's flowing us into a deeper, ever deepening surrender to know nothing, to be just handing it all over, to be an offering in every moment, to be in the silence, in the presence, just here now, to know nothing, to be nothing, to want nothing, to have nothing, to hold on to nothing, to just be here, to just be here. And what starts to happen is we start to feel the fullness of the radiance. We start to feel the fullness of a peace that is undisturbable. We start to feel the full aliveness of the flow of life flowing within itself. And we start to realize the richness and abundance of just being here, just like this, just like this. That we can't ever try to capture this and bottle it and take it back to the mind story of a world. But we just stay here. We know nothing, nothing. We have no idea, no concepts, no beliefs, nothing, nothing, nada, right? Nada, nadam, silence. Just this, just this, just this. The pure power of just being. And yes, we can start to recognize finer and finer frequencies of our own purity, the love that we are. The purity is divinity. It is what we are without a story, what we are without limitation. It's the freedom that we are in truth. No great explanations. Just this. Just a fine frequency of absolute not knowing. Hear the radiance. Hear the wide open awake field, alive and awake to itself, remembering itself. Here there is no one that knows, just a wide open, infinite field that is timeless, eternal life, bubbling joyfully, happy, just in the knowing of itself, needs nothing else but to know itself. So full, so rich, so profound. Everything, everything in nothing. Everything is here in nothing. And love is here. Love is resonating and radiantly resonating here in its purity. Just knowing itself. Just knowing itself. And this is who you are in truth. This is true nature. This is nature. Natural. This is what you are in your naturalness. And here as nature, you know that nature is life eternal. Nature, true nature, can never be destroyed. Attuning with nature, attuning with true nature, radiant nature, not a nature that can be stripped for its resources, a nature that is absolutely full and never ever can be diminished, right? Nature before appearance, the resonance of nature, true nature, and resonating here, all power to nature, uplifting nature, uplifting the whole, uplifting all that is. Resonating here. Great glory, we have broken orbit out of the sludge that was lurking around in the beginning of our meeting. So important, my friends, so important that when we meet, we do not have to spend so much time clearing the energies that are in the field, right? We spend so much time clearing the energies in the field. It is for the whole, but it is energies that in our companionship here are being entangled with. And we're going to speak this honestly, just to recognize that we're clearing, to start with, the energies of everyone present. And where there is sludge, we're clearing that sludge. There's a glory that we've broken through all of that. We've broken through all of that. So we clear the field, we clear what's in the field. And that field isn't just the ones in attendance. It's a much wider field. But it's just to say that it's so important that as we come together, that we are resonating to clear. And it's beautiful because we're clearing, we're transmuting, and that's transmutation. The frequencies from the transmutation affect the whole. It's like a dam bursting, so it spills like really like a breaking orbit. It's a big breaking orbit, and so it's really beautiful. And it's not being spoken like this in any way to bring a sense of guilt and shame. What is the point of that? That's an absolute waste of time. But it's just to say, let's resonate at these finer frequencies. Let's keep upholding these finer frequencies. Let's keep transmuting through the living of life, these finer frequencies, so that as we come together, that we transmute and we transmute, and we are just allowing the frequency of our gathering to spread far and wide, and to be uplifting and purifying and so deeply nourishing for all beings, so that all beings may remember the pure love that they are, the one love that just is, so that all beings may remember peace is in the heart, and that the remembrance of peace in the heart is the peace that all beings are longing for. Let us keep transmuting and holding this frequency at this time where there is this amplification. When we are aligned with the frequency, it's like there's a special deal on. It's like when you buy one, you get 4 gazillion free, right? So when you resonate at the frequency of love, you get a whole amplification just comes along for free. So keep resonating. So that's why the breaking orbit here is like this. It's this dam bursting, and this resonates out. And maybe it's fun to notice, how do you feel? Can you feel that purification? Can you feel a finer frequency? Can you feel a deeper silence? Can you feel more peace, more of the love that you are? Because what happens is that, so it purifies here, and it purifies the Sangha, even the beings that are not here, that are well connected in. And then it purifies all of the beings that are in the fields of all of the Sangha, all of the companions and families and friends. That's everything that's in the field, right? And then it starts purifying the fields of all of that. But it also purifies into the fields of wherever we have, let's say, like ancestral connections, and deeply rooted connections that we've had in these lifetimes, which might be almost like soul connections, even if we're not in connection with those beings, whether they've left bodies or whether they're just living lives and there's no longer connections, but it purifies those connections and then the fields around. I'm just being shown all of that right now. So it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. And as we come together, so beautiful, so beautiful. And it doesn't matter, you know, what those obscurations are. There's no judgment of the obscurations and the densities that we might be holding. But everything is being purified when we come to this frequency of love, this fine frequency of being, of remembrance. And we start really drinking the nectar of the bliss that refines and refines the nervous system, the consciousness. We start to be able to be more of a resonant beacon, more of an antenna, where our frequency is spreading further, touching more. You know, what I'm also seeing now is how there can be so many beings that we don't even know in this life that we have connections with, because within the play of humanity is a it's a dance of an experience that spans, let's say, lifetimes, right? So what I'm just seeing now illuminating in the field is all of the beings that that we have danced with. There are these lights going on. It's like, it looks like a whole matrix field of consciousness where all these lights are going on, but they suddenly go on far in the distance, that as you're resonating and the light is here, it's then like this surprising, oh, all of these little lights start twinkling, almost like stars. You know, when stars, you suddenly you notice one star, and then you notice more stars, and then suddenly like, oh wow, you can see a whole sky of stars. And it's like, what, were they always here? Were they here a couple of minutes ago? But it's like you attune. So in this attunement that's happening now, this whole field is like a starry sky with it's just lighting up. And that's the consciousness that we don't even know who and what we're connected with. That's what we're just opening into right now, that there are so many beings that we don't even know that we're connected with. But all of those stars are being illuminated in the resonance. It's very beautiful. And there's so much gratitude flowing, so much gratitude flowing in the field. Of course, that gratitude is like a nectar. It's a divine nectar as gratitude flows. So it's this flow of, like, a gratitude nectar is flowing. This light, this golden light of pure consciousness is flowing out. This is all because of the breaking orbit. It's all flowing out. Like golden light, golden radiance. Love, the fine frequency of love is loving. Can drink this love in, this remembrance of this love in. And there's also a there's also a flow of humility, like a humbling, a flow of a frequency that is humbling. And it's a flow of surrender, but it's a fine flow of surrender that is. It's a flow of surrender in what is being humbled. It's the relaxation of the humbling, of the surrender that flows as humility. So the flow of humility is a finer, a subtler frequency. But as the humility flows, as that frequency flows, it also it holds a frequency that has discordant patterns give themselves up to it. It flows as a frequency where discordant patterns just fall to their knees, we could say, in the presence of this frequency of surrender. So there's a continuing surrender happening in the field. So each being receives according to the openness, according to what the nervous system can receive. But every being receives something. Because it's one consciousness. So profundity of being the being and resonating at the frequency. It's all about the willingness. It's not that we won't trip, of course, because there's such an entanglement. It's not about that, but it's about the willingness and the sincerity and the focus. And in a way, keeping the focus upon the presence of being and upon the possibility of refining and purifying everything that appears into love. That everything that is coming forward is a flow of grace. It's all coming because it wants to remember itself as love. The one great impetus that is true within the whole of the human experience is the longing for love. We could call it the longing for happiness or the longing for peace. But love kind of encompasses everything. And so this attunement to the frequency of love, and that the longing for this love, to remember this love, is alive in every heart. And where it's alive in every heart is where there is the spark that already knows this love. Right? So we point to this. Where there's discordance, there's always a longing for love, for happiness, for freedom, for the glory. And it's because it's already known. It's already known. It's already known. Mm. So to be the light, to be the love, be this antenna, this resonating antenna, and that the whole life is this resonant frequency. Where the knowing knows the love is, where the knowing knows the light is bright. In the silence, in the stillness, in the presence of being. So resting here, receiving the nourishment, sharing the nourishment. How beautiful. One whole, undivided. The remembrance of the wholeness that has never been divided, the purity, the divinity, the love that just is.